They stood together in the fading autumn light, framed by gilded gates and 1,000 camera lenses. The king and the heir. Father and son. 2 generations of Windsor men whose every breath, every nod, every carefully calibrated smile has been rehearsed since birth. To the world, it looked like unity, a gentle tableau of continuity between crown and future crown. But to those who understand the theatre of monarchy, something was off. The air between them did not hum with warmth, it rang with distance. It had been weeks since they had spoken beyond the necessities of duty. No calls. No quiet dinners. No shared confidences. Just an endless silence stretching across Windsor and Clarence House, a silence that carried the weight of misunderstanding and pride. Behind those smiles, the air was cold enough to fracture. The courtiers knew it. The photographers sensed it. And yet, the show went on, because that is what the House of Windsor does best. It performs peace even when the walls are shaking. The immediate cause, if one could name it, was not scandal or betrayal of state, but a single sentence spoken on camera by the heir to the throne. "Change for good is on my agenda," William had said softly to Eugene Levy during his Apple TV Plus interview. It was a calm remark, delivered with that cool, measured tone the prince has perfected, but within those 6 words, the palace heard a tremor. Change, in the Windsor lexicon, is a dangerous word. Change unravels what repetition protects. King Charles had spent his life defending the fragile bridge between modernity and tradition. For decades, he fought to be seen not as a man trapped by the institution, but as one enlightened enough to renew it without breaking it. And yet, here was his son, the very future of the crown, speaking openly about reform as though the old scaffolding could be stripped away without consequence. The words may have sounded benign to the public, but to the courtiers who measure every tone, they were electric. Change for good. It sounded like hope to some. To others, like rebellion. In the silence that followed, stories began to bloom like frost. Sources whispered that the king felt betrayed. That he saw in his son's candor a criticism of his reign. That he took William's phrasing, "change for good," as a veiled reminder that his own rule, barely a year in, was already being eclipsed by the future. The whispers hardened into headlines, and the headlines carved themselves into palace corridors. It wasn't the first time an heir's honesty had unsettled the crown. Charles himself had once been that voice, restless, idealistic, too human for the marble rooms that demanded stillness. But time hardens idealism into armor. The man who once rebelled against rigidity now wore its weight like a shield. The king had learned the hard way that to speak too freely is to invite dissection, and dissection is fatal to mystique. William, by contrast, has lived his adult life in an age where mystique no longer protects. He cannot hide behind ritual, because the world no longer believes in ritual. His generation demands sincerity. His people demand access. And so, the cycle turns again, father and son, locked in the oldest royal paradox, continuity versus evolution. When news of the supposed rift broke, Buckingham Palace reacted in its usual way, not with words, but with optics. Within days, the royal photographers were summoned. A schedule was reshaped, a joint appearance arranged. The image had to be corrected. The king and his heir would be seen together, side by side, smiling, speaking, laughing, if possible. They would be the picture of unity, a performance as precise as the ticking of the palace clocks. The cameras captured them perfectly. The lenses saw harmony, the trained eye saw restraint. Charles, dignified but weary, kept his posture regal, his eyes soft but unreadable. William, ever the soldier of composure, mirrored him almost perfectly. Yet between them, there was no shared glance, no unguarded exchange, only the choreography of protocol. In that single outing, the illusion was restored, but the wound remained. Inside the palace, silence filled the spaces where conversation should have been. The courtiers spoke of logistics, not feelings. The two men continued their duties, one in the role of sovereign, the other as heir, but their emotional distance began to mirror the physical architecture of monarchy itself. Two worlds connected by duty yet separated by age, instinct, and history. Those who have worked closely with both describe the contrast like a shifting of seasons. Charles is autumn, reflective, deliberate, steeped in memory and tradition. William is spring, brisk, sharp, restless, impatient for what comes next. Together, they form the cycle of renewal the monarchy depends upon, but even cycles can falter. When William spoke to Levi, his words weren't careless. They were the product of long calculation, the subtle rebranding of the monarchy in his own image. Less ceremony, more authenticity. Less distance, more presence. He spoke not as a man waiting for power, but as one already shaping its form. The irony, of course, is that such ambition mirrors his father's in youth. But history rarely tolerates two reformers in one bloodline. The palace aides tried to soften the noise. Royal historian Robert Lacey stepped forward, his voice polished with authority. This should not be seen as criticism of King Charles, he told People magazine. William is very close to his father, and has been his most important supporter. It was the line they all needed. And yet, like all official denials, it rang hollow precisely because it had to be said. If the bond were unbreakable, why insist upon it? Behind those reassurances lies a deeper truth, one older than either man. Every monarch is haunted by his successor, and every heir lives in the shadow of his father. The love is real, but so is the rivalry. The crown may pass down bloodlines, but it never shares. Only one can wear it, and even the kindest transition is an act of erasure. Charles understands this. He spent 70 years waiting, watching his own mother embody a role he could not yet touch. He learned patience, and patience hardened into habit. For William, patience feels like paralysis. He sees a world changing faster than tradition can follow, and he knows that by the time his turn comes, reverence may have turned to indifference. For him, change for good is not rebellion, it is survival. And yet, the price of that survival may be the relationship that once grounded him. There was a time when William and Charles were united by grief. After Diana's death, they navigated the ruins together, awkwardly, quietly, but with shared understanding. The father who once struggled to express emotion found his son's restraint comforting. The son, too young to remember life without scrutiny, found in his father's patience a kind of safety. But as years passed, the world shifted. William grew into a figure of empathy, accessibility, and pragmatic calm, everything the public once wished Charles could be. That transformation, while admirable, came with its own invisible blade. For a monarch, to be overshadowed is a quiet humiliation. The silence between them now is not absence of love, but abundance of caution. They both know what words can do. They both remember how one interview, decades ago, reshaped their family's destiny. And so, the conversations that might heal them remain unspoken, sacrificed to the altar of caution. The courtiers, meanwhile, whisper strategies. Joint appearances. Carefully worded statements. The occasional leak to the press about mutual affection. But none of it conceals the truth that the British monarchy, for all its crowns and choirs, is still a human family trapped inside a story too big for any of them to control. Each plays his role, the king, dignified yet defensive, the heir, confident yet constrained. Both aware that history watches, ready to judge who will adapt, who will endure. And through it all, the cameras never blink. What the world saw that day, the king's faint smile, the son's immaculate composure, was not reconciliation. It was performance. But behind that performance lies the oldest tension of all, the struggle between blood and crown, love and duty, silence and survival. One day, the silence will break. The son will inherit not just the throne, but the shadow of his father's hesitation. The words, "change for good," will return, not as promise, but as prophecy. And perhaps then, when marble halls echo with his footsteps alone, William will understand that even change carries the weight of the past. For now, they walk side by side, the king guarding his kingdom of tradition, the prince shaping his kingdom of tomorrow, their hearts beating in quiet opposition beneath the same royal crest. Between them stretches the cold, glittering silence of history.